Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first launch with leaders. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and thank you so much for taking your time out today and spending your lunch hour with us. So, if you're listening to this on replay, I want to say thank you for taking the time to listen. So, if you are here, just let me know where you're listening from. I just want to have an idea where everybody is listening from just so I can, you know who's on and where they're listening from and so on. So let me know in the chat. Oh, nice. Chidima Onukoga from New Jersey, Diane from Portland, Oregon, Maria from New Jersey. Oh my God. Someone says LinkedIn user from DC. I can't really tell, but Jennifer from DC, Bordertown, New Jersey. This is exciting. So, welcome, Jennifer, Nicole. I'm excited to see you here. Oh my God, the chat is just going crazy. All right, welcome everyone. I'm really glad that you all are here. You're in for a treat today. So, I am Adesi Dogoyan, the founder of African Women in STEM. So, our mission, African Women in STEM, is to empower the women in our community to take ownership of their careers and their lives, reach their full potential and pay it forward. And we do this primarily through education, like what we're doing today, through mentoring and through networking. Um, our topic today is on overcoming imposter syndrome, how we can move from self-doubt to self-belief. Now, I'm going to read some kind of definition or description of imposter syndrome just to level the playing field and make sure that we're all on the same page. So, imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon where individuals, in spite of all their accomplishments, believe that they're frauds or they don't deserve their success, right? So, when people suffer from imposter syndrome, they struggle to internalize their achievements because they're afraid of being called out as imposters. So this can lead to anxiety, it can lead to overworking because you're trying to keep proving that you deserve the things that you have because for some reason you don't believe you do. And it can actually lead to burnout. And we don't want any of these things for ourselves or for the people that we care about. So if and when we suffer from imposter syndrome, it's important that we understand how to free ourselves from these chains of self-doubt and reach our full potential. So, like I said, I have a wonderful guest today joining me. So, this is Dr. Ijoma Nwogo. I connected with Ijoma when I left a comment on one of her LinkedIn video clips. So, I did so because it was very impactful to me, so I had to say something. So, she reached out to me and we set up a call and we talked like we'd known each other forever. So, anyway. Ijoma is an amazing person. She's an expert at what she does, and I just couldn't keep her to myself. So that's why we're here. And I promise you, you're in for a treat. So welcome, Ijoma.
Hi, thank you so much, Adese. It's a pleasure to be here to support African women in STEM. Super excited for our conversation. So I'm looking forward to everyone just constantly chiming into the chat to let us know what your thoughts are, what you're feeling, thinking, what you're learning, all of that. So yeah, didn't know how you wanted me to jump in, but I'm following your lead.
No, amazing. I just wanted to say hello. So I'm going to go ahead and read your wonderful bio, your amazing
Okay.
bio, because I don't want to keep all of this to myself. So Ijoma is the author of the upcoming book, Overcoming Imposter Anxiety, Move Beyond Fear of Failure, Self-Doubt, and Self-Doubt, Embrace Your Worthy, Capable Self. She's an accredited coach and owner of Everlead LLC, a leadership coaching and consulting enterprise. She's a well-regarded speaker and has led numerous talks, workshops, and conference sessions across the nation on the topic of overcoming imposter anxiety. So we're definitely in good hands today. Ijoma has more than 16 years of experience working as an educator and an administrator in higher education across the United States. She was a director of the Multicultural Center at Rice University in Houston, and an adjunct professor at the University of Houston. So each of her received a doctoral degree in counseling, her master's degree in college student affairs administration from the University of Georgia. She also completed a bachelor's in psychology and sociology from Georgia State University. So that was a mouthful, and I'm really glad that you shared that with us. So that definitely tells us that today we're in good hands, and we hope that all our questions can get answered. So our goal today is to first of all understand what imposter syndrome is, how it impacts us, and what we can do about it. So I'm going to go ahead and start asking questions, but like Ijoma said, feel free to please put your comments, your questions in the chat, because towards the end, we're going to take some questions from you all. So here we go. I know earlier on
Where do you see your questions? Do you see it in StreamYard or on LinkedIn?
I think both, but I see mine in StreamYard. If you click on the comments,
Okay.
there's no questions. But I'm going to try to pick the questions when they leave it in the
Okay.
comments, and I'll read it
I
out
see
to
them
you.
now.
Yeah. All right. So can you please tell us, in your words, as the expert, what imposter syndrome, self-doubt, and anxiety are? So, because things that many of us have heard about, but we don't fully understand it. So, if you can define the concept for us, it probably will help us, a lot.
Sure. Okay. So there's a lot to unpack when it comes to this phenomenon known as imposter syndrome in pop culture, right? So I'm sure you've seen the reels and the posts and everyone's opinions and the thought leaders talking about imposter syndrome. It started the phrase imposter phenomenon was coined in 1978 by two psychologists, Clance and Imes. So they originally studied women and this phenomenon that they coined imposter phenomenon. Now, imposter phenomenon is not to call someone an imposter, right? That's where a lot of people get confused. Like, am I an imposter? Are you calling me an imposter? Absolutely not. It's simply to describe the feeling that you feel inside when you are in these new or challenging situations. So I want to be very clear about that. So they called it imposter phenomenon because it's a normal experience, a normal reaction, a common experience that we will face when we enter these new or challenging situations. And you'll often hear me say that, new and challenging situations. And somehow over time, the word syndrome was thrown in there, and no one knows like where this word syndrome comes from. I have my theories about why that happened, right? But to be clear, for me, I don't refer to it as imposter syndrome. I will use it here and there just to have people know what I'm speaking about. But syndrome implies that there's a disorder, there's an abnormality, there's a pathology. It's none of that. It's a normal experience that we encounter. It's normal. It's a normal experience of anxiety. So I refer to it as imposter anxiety, just to be more explicit about what this experience looks like. Now, you may ask, okay, there are anxiety disorders, and I don't fall into that category. True. But know that there's a difference between normal anxiety that we face day to day because life is hard, right? We enter these spaces where we feel pressure to perform, of course, is going to provoke anxiety within us, and that is normal. And there is the other category of of anxiety disorders. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about being medicated or, anxiety disorder where no matter what you're doing, you feel anxious. Imposter anxiety is very situational. When you enter a space where you don't feel emotionally safe, or you feel pressure to perform, or you feel that you don't belong because you're outnumbered or you're the other, that's when this normal reaction will occur. So in my book, in my language, I refer to it as imposter anxiety, just to be explicit and to move away from this idea of syndrome. But I do acknowledge that it is a normal experience, it is a normal phenomenon. Now, self doubt, people don't, I've learned that people don't like to really say that they doubt themselves. Like, that's heavy and it feels like permanent. Like, I have self doubt. Somehow people just resonate with imposter syndrome, which, I mean, as long as we all know what we're talking about here, so you could call it whatever you want to, whatever resonates with you. I'm just giving you kind of a history lesson and why I choose to refer to it as imposter anxiety. But I realize that a lot of people, in trying to move away from the term imposter syndrome, they say, Let's talk about self-doubt, but then people don't want to say that they doubt
Mm-hmm.
themselves, right?
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. And so you asked about anxiety. So I kind of distinguish that where there is normal anxiety, which imposter anxiety falls in that category.
Mm-hmm.
Very contextual, depending on the situation you're in, your context, right? That sort of anxiety doesn't follow you everywhere. For example, if you feel anxiety, imposter anxiety at work, and you leave work, you feel confident, right? So it's very situational. So that's kind of some distinctions between the different terms.
I am so glad that you said this because I, I did not know this much about it. And I think it helps a lot because right now it's taken the stigma out. Because
Yeah.
to be honest, with the term syndrome, it sounds like something abnormal, something is actually wrong with you. And
Hmm.
I know you said that people like identify with that easily, but I also think that people just do that because they don't have a choice, right? So thank you very much for explaining
Yeah.
this. I think it kind of alleviates
Yeah.
because I was curious about why you have the term imposter anxiety. I kind of went over that, but I was like, let me use imposter syndrome because that's the one
Mhm.
word
Oh
that
yeah.
everybody is familiar with and used to. But thank you very much for that distinction.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I don't know. Somebody said they may have dropped off, but just try to rejoin. And everybody else, please let me know. Are you guys still on? Can you still hear us? Just type that in the chat just to let me know. All right, so going on to the next question. So, a lot of your work is around this, right? So, I'm just wondering do you have any personal experience with this, or is this something that happened in your life, that
Yeah.
shaped the way you look at things and, how you come up with the strategies to manage them and so on?
Okay. So your question is, do I have any experience with imposter anxiety? Haven't felt that. Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for sure. And the main experience for me was when I was 22 years old in grad school. And drop in the chat if you felt that imposter syndrome. Drop a yes, yes if you felt imposter syndrome or imposter anxiety when you were in grad school, sitting in those classes, right? And you're
Yeah,
around these people.
me.
Yes, you're around these people who you think come with a wealth of knowledge and experience. And it's like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't nearly know as much as they know, right? So
Mhm.
that was my situation. Overall, I was a confident individual, right? But in that context, where I'm comparing myself to my peers, seeing that they come from different parts of the United States, hearing the different ways that they speak, hearing them talk about the topics that we were talking about in class,
Mhm.
I just felt like, what in the world am I doing here? Um, Things that would have helped me feel more comfortable in that space was if I didn't feel so outnumbered, because
Mhm.
stereotype threat was floating in my mind. Now, let me know if you've heard of stereotype threat. Just write stereotype threat, yes, right? Let us know if you've heard of stereotype threat. So, stereotype threat is when you are aware of the stereotypes about your identity group and you are afraid to show up as that stereotype in a
Mhm.
space because you are afraid of being judged, right? So you tend
Yeah.
to feel that a lot when you are outnumbered, when you are the only, right? So instead of learning and being curious and taking in the knowledge and participating, your mind is preoccupied about, gosh, how can I not show up as this stereotype? So stereotype threat was very prevalent for me in graduate school. Um, and so that's what I think of. So I had crippling imposter anxiety as a graduate student. I'd never raised my hand to speak. I was mute. And that was not who I was. I'm very expressive, I can
Mhm.
be very talkative. But I noticed a shift in how I showed up in that space. I'm like, man, what is going on? Why do I feel this heavy feeling? And at the time, I thought something was wrong with me. I thought
Yeah.
that I had a problem. I had no idea what imposter syndrome was. I didn't know that it was a normal experience, a normal
Mhm.
reaction that high achieving individuals experience in those new and challenging situations. Once I
Mhm.
learned about it, I was like, oh, no, I don't have to feel so alone in this. I'm normal. I can show up in this space and I am worthy and I am capable. Once I started learning more about it, that was liberating for me. And
Mhm.
that's an important weapon to have, is that knowledge that this thing is a real thing and you're not alone in experiencing it. So that was liberating in and of itself, for me, at that, in learning about it.
I
Again,
agree.
yeah.
I agree because I think for me when I found first of all like you too, I felt the same
Mhm.
things, but I didn't have a name for it.
Yeah,
And
I
then
didn't
when
have
I
any
when
idea.
I had a term for it, I realized that other people went through the same thing. And going back
Yeah.
to what you said, it really impacts high achieving individuals because you're thinking, I am so great at this. Why am I not great anymore? And then you keep trying,
Mhm.
and then the more you try, the less confident you feel, just because there are other factors that are impacting you that you don't have any name for, you're not aware of it, you don't know how to deal with it. The only response we seem to have is work harder and try to prove and try to prove.
Mm,
And it's just like a never-ending cycle because you're really in
yeah.
competition with yourself, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And we get so caught up in our self doubt or feelings of inadequacy that we don't realize that we already have what it takes to either get started or to even thrive in what we're trying to do. We already have the knowledge and skills, but because we're caught up in looking left or right to compare, we
Yeah,
forget that we already have what it takes. Right?
that's true.
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you so much for that. And Diane is saying stereotype threat is a new term for her. It's a new term for me too, but I like this. That's why I have you on here
Mm,
because you're the expert. You're
yeah.
schooling us on the distinctions, and at least now we have a name for the things and we have a better understanding of them.
Yeah.
So moving on to next. So meanwhile, in the meantime, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we're gonna get to them, at the end. So going back to what you mentioned, like it's imposter syndrome, let's use that term for now. It's
Yeah.
particularly common in high achieving people. But now I want to focus on high achieving women. Why do you think that this is the case, and why do you think that this is a problem that high achieving women face? You know.
Yeah. Um, the word that comes up for me is perfectionism. And I believe that as women, we have been socialized to be perfect in all that we do. And it's so funny because one of my doctors was talking about going to a conference with surgeons presenting, and a lot of the male presenters, now, this is not to put men down, but I'm just trying to highlight the socialization. A lot of the
Yeah.
male presenters didn't really know like the details of what they were talking about, but they were so confident in speaking. And then the women were questioning themselves like, is this, enough? Am I good enough with this? And feeling nervous about their presentation, but they knew what they were talking about and they didn't even realize it. So that's what I was saying. Like we are so equipped with the knowledge to show up, but because we've been groomed to be perfect, what is more than enough is not enough in our eyes. Whereas maybe men maybe have been groomed to be more confident presenting, and to recognize that what they have is enough. And she just noticed that difference. And I thought that was interesting, right? So I wouldn't say women experience imposter anxiety more than men. It just can be exacerbated when you're grappling with stereotypes, grappling with socialization of, being groomed to be perfect. There are multiple factors. And for sure, like your identity, and if you feel marginalized in a space, if you, like I said, if you feel like the only one in a space, that stereotype threat will show up. And for women, you might be the only woman in a tech field or something, and you're like, what am I doing here? And you start questioning yourself and all of that. Um, so men for sure experience imposter anxiety. I have clients who are men who certainly talk about imposter anxiety, and they feel it too. One of my colleagues talked about having most of her clients be men who were trying to move past imposter anxiety. So I think it's not a women's issue. It started off being researched, and the research was focused on women, but we're learning that anyone across the gender spectrum can experience imposter anxiety at different points in their lives.
Well, thank you for that. Because for some reason, I don't know. I think maybe it's just because of the way social media is and the kind of things that are highlighted, it seems like one, it's an issue for just something that impacts women more. And then also, I'm in STEM, so it's a male-dominated field. I'm used to being the only everything, woman, black, whatever you want to call it. So there's also that, like you talked about, so that falls back to your like stereotype trends right there. So I think that in combination actually makes it more, I guess maybe in my field where you have women like the minority or blacks are the minority. So that's where you tend to hear
Right.
that term more. So for me, it kind of seems like, oh, it's something that primarily impacts women or primarily impacts people that are minority. But thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
I did listen to a LinkedIn Live the other day where they were talking about the same thing. And of course, it definitely impacts everybody, just regardless of who you are.
The what
All
now? I didn't
right.
catch that part.
No, they were talking about the same things. Like, men can be impacted by that.
Okay.
Some men
Hmm.
are more reserved, some are introverts, some are quieter,
Hmm.
and so on. So, yeah. I'm gonna go on to the next question. So, what are the signs, or I'll call it early signs, because we experience this a lot, but we don't know what it is. So now that we are getting aware, are becoming aware of what it is, what are the signs of imposter syndrome and anxiety that we should be aware of?
Sure. And, imposter anxiety is not like a diagnosis, like we said. So I wouldn't necessarily say early signs, but I will say signs. There are
Mhm,
signs to look out for. And there are four types of fear based reactions that you can notice you doing, right? So
mhm,
you've heard it before, fight,
mhm,
flight, freeze, and fawn.
mhm,
So I'll explain what those things are. So in fight mode, you might be overworking. You might be like pushing back if you feel like someone is questioning your competence or your
mhm,
significance or your likability, whatever it is, you might find yourself just pushing back or um, overworking yourself or trying to perfect a presentation and spending too much time doing that, trying to fight
mhm.
against being exposed as a fraud. So if you find yourself overworking and just doing too much, as the kids say, um, that
Yeah.
that is a fear-based reaction, right? Versus
Mhm,
employing self-care and setting those boundaries of respect, even for yourself, to say, "This is enough. I've pursued excellence. I don't have to pursue perfection." Right. So when you notice yourself just doing too much, that's one sign. Also, we talked about fight. We're talking about flight or flee. If you notice yourself running away from applying for a new job that you know that you want, but you feel that you won't be that great at, right? You're
mhm,
running away from opportunities that are promising, or they may be challenging, but they are good growth opportunities. You find yourself fleeing from conversations that you know you need to have, but you're afraid of like saying the wrong things, or just that fleeing behavior,
mhm,
avoidance, right? Leaving early at an event because you don't want to have certain conversations, or coming late. Just noticing that fleeing or flight behavior. Another one is freeze, when you kind of are at a standstill.
mhm,
You don't want to make any moves because that move might be the wrong move. And then you're afraid of being exposed as a fraud. So you kind of freeze. You don't say anything. Like me in grad school, I froze. I didn't raise my hand to speak up and share my perspectives. I didn't, just show up the way that I wanted to show up because I was afraid if I opened my mouth, I would say something dumb. Right. So if
mhm,
you notice that freezing behavior, that's another fear based reaction. And then fawn. Fawn is one that we don't often talk about. We've heard of fight or flight, we've heard of freeze, but fawn is kind of underexplored. So that one is people pleasing. When you
mhm,
notice yourself trying to just bend over backwards to make someone happy so that you can remain in their good graces, that's another fear based reaction that we do when we feel imposter anxiety. We may feel that we don't have much to offer in a space, and we're trying to over accommodate by making others feel good or making them feel
mhm,
good about us, when all that does is exhaust you and you're not living in your truth. You're not being authentic. So, those are four signs that you can look for to say, okay, what's going on here? Am I dealing with some self doubt, some fear of failure, some perfectionistic traits, all of that. So you ask yourself those questions.
So please, one, the last one, can you spell that? Because I'm definitely, this is the first time I'm hearing. I mean, I know what it means, but I've never heard that term. So can you spell
Yeah.
that just so that
So it's F.
everybody?
Yeah, it's FAWN.
That's what I thought, but I wanted to be sure.
Be sure.
Thank you
Yes.
very much for that. And as we were speaking, because prior to now, how I handled conflict was just walking away. And in my opinion, it was like I just didn't want to say anything I regret, or I kind of saw myself as a bigger person, whatever.
Hmm.
But I'm thinking of it right now. That's a form of fleeing, right? Because I'm like I don't ever want to have a confrontation because I'm always thinking, what would I look like in those situations? And because I feel like I have no control, I don't want to
Yeah.
do it. But it's really
Yeah.
not the best way to live because there's some conversations that need to be had, and I've
Yeah.
been learning that over the past couple of years, and hopefully it's better. But thank you for that, and thank you for dropping another new word that
Absolutely.
we kind of knew what it was, but we didn't have a term for it. But I'm learning so much, and I hope everybody else is. So please continue to put in your comments. I'm really excited about this, and I'm going to save your questions. Naomi says she's experienced all of this, and at times she feels like she's experienced them all at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
Naomi's like, I had the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
at the same time. Oh,
Yes.
wow. I'm sure most of us have. I'm pretty sure I have too, definitely. But this is helping a lot. All right. So, I think, okay, we've talked about misconceptions. First of all, it's not imposter syndrome because that makes it, almost like there's something wrong with you. But is this something that people don't understand about imposter syndrome that makes it impossible for them to speak out, seek help, or try to do things to overcome it?
Sure. Yeah. I think when people have these feelings, I think some folks tend to blame themselves for having imposter anxiety. Um, but you shouldn't blame yourself. It's not your fault because we've all been socialized, conditioned to believe certain narratives and to follow certain ways of being, like these perfectionistic characteristics that we've all been kind of groomed to follow, especially women. And we're trying to just be accepted and liked. And with that natural longing, we will try to follow the status quo so that we can remain in the good graces of other people, so that we could succeed, so that we could just be happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, with us trying to just keep up with life and with all the things that we've been taught over time, of course, we're going to experience imposter anxiety. It is not your fault. Now, it is up to us to unlearn a lot of the self limiting narratives that we've internalized over time. That is very important. So, any opportunity you get to do some personal development, to attend conversations like this, to spend time processing and unlearning the untruths, the falsities that we've internalized and absorbed over time, it's not a one shot thing either.
Mm. I can
You have
imagine.
to
Yeah.
do the work because we've lived, like for me, 40 plus years, right, of being taught so many things. And now I'm spending the other half of my life unlearning, unlearning,
Mm-hmm.
unlearning, relearning the truths about who I am, why I'm worthy, why I'm capable, right? Like we have to spend time doing the work. Just because we are not to blame, just because we are not like responsible for what happened to us, doesn't mean we're not responsible for doing the work of unlearning.
I
We
like
all have
that.
that responsibility.
Yeah.
But the thing that keeps people behind, just like when I was in grad school, I thought something was wrong with me. Nothing is wrong with you. You are capable, you are worthy, right? And this is a normal reaction. So that's why people don't really open their mouths to communicate what's going on with them, because they think they are to blame, it's their fault, that they are not confident, that something is wrong with them. All of that is false. So the more you reveal it, the more you heal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
That
what we
is so
have to always
true.
be mindful of. And then when you share with someone, they may be like, me too. Like when I go to work, that's
Mm-hmm.
how I feel too. And then it becomes normalized for you. and you feel validated. So we have to be able to communicate and express what we're dealing with so others can support us, so we could feel validated, so that, we know that we're not alone in this journey.
I like that a lot. And I'm going to read some of the things from the comments. So Diane says, this is a very interesting perspective. And she, I think sorry, I'm reading it. Um, there's a possibility to never having experiencing this. She didn't recall feeling this until her second career. And I can imagine because I was reading something yesterday where somebody was talking about, are you okay with starting from zero? And
Mm,
sometimes when you start from zero, that's when all this stuff coming because you had a whole career before that and you were doing exceptionally well. And then all of a sudden, years down the line, you're starting something new and it seems like you're failing at it. And then
mm,
Obina said that most immigrants feel imposter anxiety, and it weighs over time. But knowing about it, and like you said, talking about it can help us overcome it as well. So thank you
awesome.
guys for being, interactive in the chat and for posting.
Yeah.
Keep it coming. Keep the comments coming.
Yeah. And
I'm enjoying
may
this.
I comment about what someone said about
Hmm.
starting from the bottom, or is that the comment you made, Adeze? Or did you see
No,
that?
it was Diane. She talked. No, well, I kind of added to what she said
Okay.
about having a second career and starting over. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people will feel that fear, like I'm starting from the bottom back to the top. My perspective is no experience is lost. There is no experience that is wasted. We don't waste experiences here. We only learn from them. We learn what we like, we learn what we will no longer tolerate anymore. Um, and whatever lessons we gathered from that first experience, we're going to apply it to the next. Sure, it
Hmm.
may not be in the same field, but there are lessons that you can learn from your past experiences, right? So I just feel like there's no experience that's lost. You'd be surprised at how much you could actually apply from your first experience to your second, if you only view it as no experience is wasted.
Hmm.
You know,
That is so true.
everyone's timeline is going to look different. Some
Hmm.
people are in careers forever, like our grandparents, right? And these days, there are so many opportunities. And then you start realizing, oh my gosh, I actually like that. And it's
Hmm.
okay to switch. It's okay to switch your careers. That doesn't mean you're a failure. That just means you've recognized what you actually like. And
Hmm.
now is your time to go for it.
Thank you
Right.
for
So I just
bringing that
wanted to
up
throw that in.
because that is really hard, because most people realize that they want something different or they want something new, but the fear of now I'm starting over, am I going to be good at this? Keeps them
Mm-hmm.
from doing that. But Serena said that, funny enough, she felt the imposter anxiety in her first career, but in her second career, she didn't. And I know Serena, and I'm going to say it because she's absolutely amazing at what she's doing. So maybe she actually found her true calling, and that's why that was the case. So
Yeah.
just go out there and try whatever it is you want to try. It'll be good for you.
Yeah.
All right, so can we talk about the role of mentorship and community in helping us overcome imposter syndrome? I know Bina said something about that in the chat. Um,
Mm-hmm.
being around people kind of helps you overcome that over time. But how can we tap into like mentors or communities to help us overcome this anxiety? Shameless plug.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big advocate for affinity groups, being in groups where folks share similar identity as you, so that you could hear each other's lived experiences, to know that you're not in this alone. And
Mhm.
when you see people who look like you doing the work that you want to be able to achieve one day, they serve as proof that success is possible for you too. That's why it's really important to get connected to those who you're inspired by, like-minded folks. And community is just a chance to, again, be validated, to have that affirmation, to not that you should depend on people to affirm you. You affirm yourself first. But
Mhm.
it's like a cherry on top. You get, you have a space where folks are saying, yeah, me too, right? And that me too is so powerful in making you feel empowered, affirmed, validated, all of that. So, community, we have to be very intentional in seeking those spaces where we feel safe,
Mhm.
psychologically safe, emotionally safe, where we are around people who have similar identities as us. That's really important. And to actively, like, Um, Connect with folks, and don't be afraid to do it. Connect with folks who you want to serve as your mentor. Tell them why you are inspired by them, and ask them to be your mentor. It's just that simple. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
feel easy to do, but it is seriously just that simple, to say, I'm inspired by you. I would love it if you would be my mentor. What timeline works for you? Would you like to like chat
Mm-hmm.
every month? Like, and tell them your goals so that they could hold you accountable and let you know, like a good mentor or a good coach will tell you, look, I know you have these doubts and these feelings, but you already have what it takes to get started. And they'll lay
Mm-hmm.
it out for you and remind you of how dope you are. Because sometimes I'm telling you, we get clouded. We forget of
That's
all the
true.
accomplishments
Yeah.
that we've already achieved. And we forget. And we think we don't have what it takes, and we do. So that's why connecting with others who can see past, your blinders, who could see from
Mm-hmm.
outside looking in and tell you what they see in you, very important.
Mm-hmm. And what you said, like generally we can't see ourselves. We have to look in the mirror. But when you look in the mirror, you're not exactly seeing yourself the way you are because you're, you're reversed. So,
Uh-huh.
and just speaking to that, like African Women STEM, that's one of the reasons why I started it. Because I was just tired of being isolated. And then a lot of us were isolated in wherever we were. So the whole idea of having a community together, I remember one of the first meetings that we had, everybody was like, oh my God, I feel so comfortable to talk about things. And this is absolutely amazing. So I like what you said too about asking somebody to be your mentor. That's one thing I never knew was possible because I was always afraid that the person will say no. So
No.
now we know. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to reach out, but have a plan before you do. Don't just go
Yeah.
say, I wanted to be my mentor. Why? Ah, well, I don't know. I just want to be my
Yeah, you have those, what is it, 3 points? You tell them why they inspire you. You tell
mentor.
them your goals and how you believe they could, offer you maybe some insights to
Mm,
succeed. Like you give them those 3 pointers, right?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and think about it for yourself. If somebody came to you telling you that they're inspired by you, why would you be like, no, I don't want to help you. Like, I don't want to be your
No.
mentor. You would be flattered.
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh my gosh, of
Mm-hmm.
course I would mentor you. So we have to like think about it that way.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's so true. Thank you for that. And I'm going to ask, and then one more, and we'll go to the audience questions. So that we have a couple of questions here. So, how can organizations and leaders, because most of us here, are professionals working in companies, some of us own our businesses, but if we don't belong to organizations, we're leaders in our own right. How can they contribute an environment that reduces imposter syndrome, imposter anxiety among their employees?
Yeah. And I think a lot of things begin with self work. Once we start learning more about imposter anxiety, seeing it within us, and recognizing just a lot of things around that topic, we can have more empathy and understanding for other people.
Mm-hmm.
So, without that empathy, there won't be a lot of change. Like, you have to have that empathy, see it within yourself, and say, man, if I'm feeling like this, other people might be feeling like this too, including my employees. So, what can I do about it?
Mm-hmm.
So, empathy, understanding is key. So I think leaders are responsible for dismantling any cultures, any systems, any policies that reinforce, like that kind of perpetuate imposter anxiety in a workspace. These ideals of like failure is bad, you have to be perfect. Like if those are principles and ideals that guide an organization, that needs to be dismantled in order for imposter anxiety to be mitigated. So I would encourage leaders of organizations to critique, company culture, the culture of competition, what that looks like, what that
Mm-hmm.
means for you, perfectionism, to be able to celebrate failures and efforts, to see the opportunity in failure. Like once you start shifting culture and critiquing it, that will help dismantle a lot of the toxic messages and narratives that are floating around in organizations and making people just feel the stress of imposter anxiety.
I
I think it's
agree.
important for leaders to amplify the voices of those who are marginalized in that space and to view someone's difference as an advantage, to view someone's difference as authority. For example, if you have, a group of people who have 5 years of experience, and then there's someone in there with 25 years of experience doing that, they are the expert. They are like the top expert, the authority, people are listening to them. So I think for when you are maybe the only person of your identity, you become like an authority voice because of your difference. So your difference is not a deficiency. And I want organizations to be able to identify, oh, this person comes from a unique identity. They may have a different perspective about this, and treat them as if they are an authority in that space. That's what I would challenge organizations to do. I would say give decision-making power to those who are marginalized, not just awards, because organizations love giving awards to people that are doing
Yeah.
work, but they will
Yeah.
never give them, which annoys me, they will never give them decision-making power,
But that's all
titles.
that counts, really.
Yeah, because they know that with that power to make decisions, that person may come in to challenge the status quo. But challenging the status quo is often what is needed to shift the culture. So I would challenge organizational leaders to stop with the awards. Yeah, no, keep giving the awards, but also give the decision making power and authority to those who are marginalized in the space.
I agree.
Yeah, and
I
also
agree.
like
Because, yeah.
foster like self care, boundaries, respecting boundaries, and helping employees to employ self care. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to be stressed out doing your work all the time. And then the performance is going to be affected, the morale, all that gets impacted if we are not taking care of ourselves. So that is the charge of leaders of organizations, to help reduce this experience of fear, failure, and self doubt that we're talking about.
I agree. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to go ahead and take some of the questions that we have. And thank you guys for asking your questions. So this is from Serena. She said you mentioned high achievers and also minorities as people that might feel imposter anxiety. And she said, is it possible to live an accomplished life and not ever feel imposter anxiety? So she wonders if it's a modern phenomenon that we just talk about now, and in a world that has a narrow definition of success, and if it's more that people in the past never really experienced imposter anxiety.
Oh, yeah, I've talked
So
to a few. Oh, go ahead, finish your question. I
no,
want to
no.
make
So
sure
I
I.
mean, okay. I was just gonna explain a little bit. So basically, is imposter anxiety something that we're suffering in this our day, this age and time? And did people in the past not suffer it? So is it possible to live a life, an accomplished life, and never feel it ever?
I think since the beginning of time, there have been standards, there have been expectations of people, and with that comes pressure. So I think it's nature and nurture, right? So the nurture part is like what you've learned from your environment, the expectations that put pressure on you. And then the nature part has to do with your survival instinct. And the way your survival instinct works is when it senses like physical danger or emotional danger or the fear of being exposed as a fraud, which is what we're talking about, it'll activate and want you to fight, flight, flee, or fawn, right? So that's the natural part of us that's paired with the nurture part. So what it does is complicated, but I'm going to try to describe it.
Please do.
Yeah, I mean, like we all have survival instinct. When we hear a noise, we jump. We're getting ready to fight, right? So
Yeah.
same thing when we sense emotional danger, the fear of being exposed as a fraud. Our survival instinct will activate and want us to have those four fear-based reactions. So what it does is the message it'll pull from is like, girl, you don't want to expose yourself as a fraud. So it'll hold on to that idea that you've been socialized with, and it's paired with that nature part of you, your survival instinct, and it'll cause these self-sabotaging behaviors. So I say all this to say, since the beginning of time, we've had narratives in our minds of how we should be, right? It wasn't until 1978 that language was put to this experience. They called it imposter phenomenon. But There are some people who say that they've never experienced imposter anxiety. That's fine because some people may have truly come up in different environments where they were empowered all the time, nurtured all the time, given positive messages. I wouldn't say that's that common because we switch environments. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but some people will say, yeah, I've never experienced that. And it's been studied that roughly like 82% of people will have encountered this normal anxiety. And then people are like, well, what happened to the other 20 plus percent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people just say they've never encountered it. So I would love to even study that, like study folks who don't identify with this imposter anxiety and see what, how they grew up and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it
I
is
love to as well.
right. It is possible to, like, what was the name of the person who asked that question?
Serena.
Serena. Yeah, I mean, it is possible to not feel imposter anxiety and to know your accomplishments and all that. It's possible. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to go over to the next question. It kind of links to what we talked about with how organizations can help, but in what ways can we help others? So we talked about what leaders can do in organizations, and now we're talking about what can we in organizations do to help others open their minds and take this topic more seriously.
I think the word that comes up for me is storytelling. Now, I'm not saying go have a fireside chat with some hot cocoa and you're like, one day. No, just
Once upon a
incorporate
time.
just incorporate storytelling in whatever persuasive conversation you're trying to have. The same way I talked about my story when I was 22 years old in grad school, sitting at that, those 3 hour long classes, not wanting to speak, not raising my hand, and then going home, plopping myself on the bed, feeling remorseful for not opening my mouth. And just that whole cycle I just
Mm,
went through. And I'm like, what is going on here? Sharing your personal story connects you with others on an emotional level. And that's
mm,
often what's missing in the workplace. People
yes.
think emotions are weak. Emotions and vulnerability is actually your power. It is a superpower because people make emotional decisions, whether they want to admit it or not. And being able to connect with folks on an emotional level through your storytelling is a way in. Sometimes facts and statistics don't do it. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
connecting on that emotional level to say, hey, this really hit home for me. Does anyone else relate to this? Here's what we can do about it. Here's what's worked for me. Here's how we can support each other. And naming, having that call to action to follow your storytelling. So that's one way of trying to be heard about this topic.
I like that. Thank you very much. And that said, what are some suggestions you have for kids to help them minimize these symptoms at an early age? Because we know with kids in school, there's a lot of
Yeah.
bullying and trying
Yeah.
to belong and wanting to make friends. So what can parents do to help their kids, or what can the kids do to help
Yeah.
themselves?
I so appreciate that question because, man, that's where it starts, like
Mm,
childhood and the things that you experience, and that those are formative years, right? Where they absorb a lot, and it's a process to really unlearn things that you learned as a child. So it is so
mm,
important as parents to start and constantly lift up their child, tell them why they are beautiful, important, capable, worthy, and give them rationale to back up what you're saying. Do this on an ongoing level so that they can too internalize the messages that you're saying, even though they're
mm,
at school internalizing a lot, but you can counter that and tell them, what happened in school? What thoughts are you having? And say, hey, let me tell you why that's not true. You're actually capable, and here's why. And start being very intentional about having these conversations because you're battling the conversations they're having at school. And
mm,
that is hard because they often listen to their peers, they listen to media. So you as a parent have to constantly be countering. It's not a one-shot thing, it's an ongoing process. And that's what I would say. And not only to help our children, but to also help ourselves. One thing that I feel is a system of oppression that is often underexplored is called adultism,
mm.
not adultery,
I wasn't thinking that, but hey.
not adultery,
Yeah.
adultism. we need to talk more about adultism the same way we talk about racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, whatever. Adultism is a real thing that keeps being, perpetuated over time. We learn from our parents, and then we start to do these things to our children, whether it's intentional or unintentional. So adultism is, and it's a heavy definition, adultism is maltreatment or oppression of children.
Mm.
And sometimes we think we are doing our children a service by saying harsh things to them and doing certain things to them. But when we really think about it, it's like, as an adult, would you want somebody saying those things to you? So why do we think it's okay to say that to our children?
Yeah.
They are so impressionable. They have feelings too. So I think a lot of adults, parents, we need to explore adultism if we are truly trying to um, mitigate imposter anxiety in our children. Because I had an experience where one of my parents said something really bad to me that I carried over with me into adulthood. And
Mm.
I heard that message every time I was in romantic relationships, every time I was in the classroom, every time it was time to give a presentation. It stayed with me. That's why parents, we must study adultism so that we could do a service to our children and not have them feeling like imposters when they get older.
That's
So
deep.
heavy,
That's
but
really
it's a
deep.
lot. It's like, how can we help our kids? But then we help our kids
Mm.
by helping ourselves, like studying this stuff and not imposing these harsh expectations or ways of being on them. It starts with us.
Mm. Thank you for that. That is so deep and so true. And like I
Yeah.
said, we're in for a treat today, and I'm learning so much. So I'm going to take one more question from Jennifer. She said, "How do you handle slip ups in your journey? For example, if you switch careers and it doesn't work out because you see to like
Hmm.
regress, what do you do?"
Wow. Hmm. Well, my question for you is, you switch careers and it doesn't work out. My question is, why didn't it work out? Is it because you quit too early? Or is it, I'm wondering, my question is just wondering why it didn't work
Mm,
out.
mm,
Was the space toxic? What about switching spaces to a less toxic space? I just have a lot of questions about that. But I feel that if you are in an area that you feel passionate about, you can't fail. So
mm.
I'm sorry to leave that question open a little bit, because I still have more questions
There are a
following
lot of
about
persons
that.
there. That's
Yeah,
okay. So
to
please, Jennifer, if you can clarify. So I want to move on because your book is coming. I can't wait to read it. But I want you to tell us what's the inspiration behind your book,
sure.
right? Because I mean, it promises a lot, and it's a way for us to move beyond our fear, our self doubt, and embrace our worthy and capable self, which is something that, for the most part, unless someone tells us, we tend to forget,
Yeah.
especially if we're suffering from imposter anxiety. So, tell us the inspiration behind your book and what you hope that people that read it will gain from it.
Okay. The inspiration behind my book, again, is my story when I was 22 years old. And I used to wonder, like, why in the world was that experience so heavy for me in the 2 years in my program? I became very curious about studying what was going on. That's when I started learning about imposter syndrome. And I just, over time, I just was constantly curious because I would hear my coaching clients talking about this over and over and over and over. And I did a presentation at Rice University in Houston, Texas, for incoming MBA students. Um, and it's interesting because most of the people who raised their hands to say something were women. But at the end of the presentation, I had a very long line of people. Most of them were men
Hmm.
that didn't speak up during the conversation, during the presentation. And they just wanted to tell me how it resonated with them, how they're dealing with imposter anxiety, and they had questions for me about their own experiences. I just thought that was so interesting, and I'm like, there are people out here who need this book so bad, and just seeing
Mm,
that long line
hmm.
was a visual representation for me. You need to start typing. You need to start getting this book
You need to
written.
get over there.
Yeah, because there's some people who may even still feel shame and don't want to say anything. They'll come to me and say, "Oh, thank you for, thank you for this." And I just thought that was very interesting. So I would encourage you to pre-order the book. This book is going to help you raise your hand, speak up, take charge of your experience, take up space as you should, be courageous in your efforts, be more confident as you step into different spaces that you want to be in, know how to leverage your difference and your unique qualities, stand in your authority. It reshapes your mindset about a lot of things. Like I talked about earlier, we have to unlearn so many false, fake news that we've learned over time. We
Mm,
have to unlearn all of that and relearn things that are empowering and truthful to us so that we could really step into our God-given talents and gifts and live the life that we deserve, a life that is free of all this self-doubt that's holding us back from our greatness. So it offers a lot of tangible solutions that you could apply every day, um, and has great stories. And it just overall is to get you to the result of not having this crippling effect dictate your life anymore. So I'm excited about the book. It's coming out in October. You can pre-order it now. Anywhere you buy books, Barnes and Noble, wherever you buy books, right? Um, I encourage you to buy from maybe a Black-owned business, if you will, to really support those businesses. And of course, it's on Amazon.
Well, thank you so much, Ijema. This was amazing. I learned so much. Thanks for joining us on this first episode of Launch with Leaders. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I want to thank everybody for being active in the comments, for asking questions. I even learned more from the questions that you had in the comments. That was amazing, especially the one about how we can help our children overcome or help kids overcome imposter anxiety. Ijoma, before we close, is there any personal message you want to leave for
Sure.
those that are listening on the call?
Yes. I want everyone to know that when you're dealing with imposter anxiety, treat it as a sign of success. When you have that doubt and that uncomfortable feeling, I want you to remember that it is a sign that you are on your way to a promising path. You are entering something new and challenging that's a growth opportunity. You are in a space that's going to stretch and grow you. So treat it like, okay, I must be doing something right if I feel this heaviness or this feeling, right? Because those who are not experiencing imposter anxiety, part of me is like, well, what are you doing? Are you growing? Are you challenging
Yeah.
yourself? So just know that, it's a sign of success. And I want you to have really absorb that into your mind and carry that with you. So that's what I would leave you with.
Well, thank you so much. So please follow Ijoma on LinkedIn. She's on LinkedIn. Follow me as well as African Women in STEM. And thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to have another edition of Lunch with Leaders next month. So if you follow me or African Women in STEM, you'll be aware of when we schedule it, and then you can always click and join. And this has been wonderful. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Take care.
Bye.